Before we begin this video, please check the description for links for places where you can donate to support Ukraine. Most of these places are based within the UK, as that's where I'm from, so I recommend finding places local to you where you can help. Please support Ukraine in any way you can. Welcome to our second entry in a series of discussions related to Disney properties. In this entry, we will be discussing whether or not the 1997 movie Anastasia, produced by Don Bluth and Gary Goldman and distributed by 20th Century Fox, should be banned. Anastasia may not have originally been a Disney film, but since Disney acquired 20th Century Fox in 2019, it counts as a Disney film. The concept for this entry comes from the controversy and confusion surrounding the removal of the film from Disney Plus in the USA earlier this year. We decided to create this entry now, after having some time to properly think over this discussion. This entry discusses the sensitive topic of the war in Ukraine, and we here at Under the Umbrellas want to make it clear that this entry is in no way an attempt at undermining the struggles of Ukrainians or to encourage support for the actions of Russia. We want to put it on record that we absolutely do not support Russia's invasion of Ukraine or encourage anti-Ukrainian sentiments. This entry was created for the purpose of discussing whether or not a film from the 90s has any impact on what's currently happening. Although we will be going through several scenarios as to whether or not Anastasia should or shouldn't be banned, we will not be reaching a definite conclusion to the question, as it's not our place as those who are not Ukrainian to speak on behalf of Ukrainians. We instead encourage and stress how important it is for you to support Ukraine in any way you can, and we hope this entry helps spark a discussion on a subject which should not be allowed to leave public attention. We here at Under the Umbrellas fully stand by Ukraine and its citizens, and we wish for better days to come. Despite making a disclaimer in our last entry about what constitutes a film to be in this series, I still received a few confused comments as to how a film which was originally made or released by Disney made the cut. Wasn't made by Disney, made the cut. So let me make it clear. Any film Disney currently has the rights to can make it into the series. This includes any film or show that can be found on Disney Plus. This is also how Anastasia is able to make the list. I hope this clears any confusion up, and speaking of Anastasia, let's first break down what the film is about and what happened in it. What is Anastasia about? Anastasia is loosely, and I mean very loosely, based on the real life and fall of the imperial royal family of Russia. The Romanovs, which constituted of Tsar Nicholas II of Russia, his wife Tsarina Alexandra Feodorovna, and their 5 children Olga, Tatiana Maria, Anastasia and Alexei, all of which were murdered by Bolshevik revolutionaries in July 1916. When the film was created, nobody was sure the real Anastasia had been murdered alongside her family, but recent DNA evidence has proved that she was. There was no surviving Romanov family members. Without knowing this, many made up stories about Anastasia surviving, and that's where the film Anastasia comes from. Anastasia is set in an alternate history which follows what happens to a young Anastasia, Kristen Dunst, after she and her grandmother, the Dowager Empress Marie Feodorovna, Angela Lansbury, escaped the curse of Grigory Rasputin, Christopher Lloyd, with the help of a young servant boy, Dmitri, Glenn Walker Harris Jr. Anastasia and her grandmother find themselves outside, where Rasputin is killed by falling through the ice. Anastasia and her grandmother are later separated after Anastasia fails to catch up to the train her grandmother fled on and falls to the ground. 10 years later, a now grown-up Anastasia, going by the name Anya, Meg Ryan, as she is dealing with a memory loss, leaves her orphanage in search of her past and family, with her only clue being a necklace which tells her she needs to head to Paris. She bumps into a grown-up Dmitri, John Cusack, and his friend Vlad, Kelsey Grammer, a former nobleman turned con artist. They agree to take Anya to Paris with them on the condition she pretends to be Anastasia, as they didn't know she actually was under the guise of, well, you could actually be her. You don't know, only one way to find out. The trio head to Paris, and meanwhile Rasputin, with the accidental help of his sidekick Bartok, Hank Azera, is semi-resurrected and more determined than ever to finish his curse and kill Anya, who he knows is Anastasia, because finishing his curse will bring him back to life and probably grant him immortality. I don't know. The trio meet with Sophie, Bernadette Peters, the Dowager Empress's lady-in-waiting, and convince her that Anya is the real deal, but the Dowager Empress is so upset about the many frauds she'd witnessed over the years that she won't even give Anya a chance. Dimitri realizes Anya really is Anastasia after she conveniently remembers being rescued by a boy when she was younger, and Dimitri kidnaps Anastasia's grandmother and forces her to meet with Anastasia, who wins her round in the end. Everyone is happy until Rasputin shows up again, but is defeated. Anastasia realizes that if she announces herself as a missing princess, she won't be able to marry Dimitri, who she has fallen in love with. Seeing this, her grandmother gives the couple her blessing, and they go off to live quiet, ordinary lives together. The end. So should we actually ban Anastasia? The film Anastasia takes a lot of creative liberties with the true history of the Romanovs. For example, the real Rasputin did not curse the family because he had been fired. In fact, it was, in part, the Tsarena's infatuation with the holy man and the possibility of him curing her sick son Alexei, which made the people less trusting of the royals. Feeling Rasputin had gained far too much power, they did attempt to kill the man several times, with many of them failing, which is why in the film he's represented as being undead. One thing the film gets right is that the events did take place in Russia, and the Romanov family were murdered by the people. And it's this being set in Russia which leads to the question of whether or not the film should actually be banned. I use the term actually here because when the film was removed from the US Disney Plus earlier this year, it was believed to be banned, but Disney claims it wasn't. So this isn't about whether it was banned, it's about whether it should actually be banned. And to discuss that, we need to follow two arguments: why it should be banned and why it shouldn't. Let's start with why it should. Why Anastasia should be banned. So the main reason Anastasia should be banned is its connection to Russian history and culture. The reason behind this is that these are the exact things being used as excuses, I use finger quotes for this, for Russia to justify invading Ukraine. Russia, and especially its current leader Putin, see Ukraine as an entity belonging to Russia. They want to reclaim Ukraine as their territory despite their claims of respecting its status as its own distinct country and culture. It is no secret that anything to do with Russia in 2022 is under both extreme and understandable scrutiny. This is the reason many were happy with the idea that Disney might have removed Anastasia from Disney Plus as a way of sticking it to Russia. It is something many still support months later. Banning Anastasia might not directly be supporting Ukraine, but Disney could use it to symbolize their support for the country. It certainly wouldn't hurt to make a gesture such as banning and removing their streaming site's most popular Russian-inspired asset. It already proved it can make headlines earlier this year. Disney could ban Anastasia purely to symbolize its support for Ukraine and as a subtle jab at Russian history and culture, or if they didn't want to fully ban it, perhaps they could place the film behind a paywall and send all money earned from the purchases to places supporting Ukraine. Then they are raising support for Ukraine by profiting off Russian history, and not just that, but inaccurate Russian history. That'll show them just how little they care about Russia and how little they respect it. I'm almost certain that like this would raise attention and encourage many Anastasia fans who want to keep the film on Disney Plus to raise support for Ukraine. They keep the film, the money goes to Ukraine, and those who don't want the film or to support it don't have to buy it. This was just one idea I had in support of banning Anastasia whilst directly supporting Ukraine, because at the end of the day, Ukraine is what really matters here, which is why we need to find things which will directly help and support them. So why Anastasia shouldn't be banned? Now we need to discuss the reasons why Anastasia shouldn't be banned, or more accurately, why it should stay unbanned as it is. For this argument, I think the most important thing to note is that Anastasia, despite being based on Russian history, is not a Russian film. It's an American film created by an American studio with American cast and crew. Is it being set in Russia enough reason to ban it? Possibly not, because the majority of the film isn't even set in Russia. It's set in Paris, France. The biggest reason I think warrants Anastasia remaining unbanned is the fact that its status has no real impact on Ukraine. Yes, it would be nice to go through with the paywall idea I proposed, but realistically, Disney isn't going to do it. and Ukrainians have far more to worry about than whether or not a film from the 90s is banned or not. Our focus should be fully on Ukraine and distracting ourselves with petty arguments like whether Anastasia should be banned or not because it simply hints at the existence of Russia is not helpful. At the end of the day, my thoughts, Disney's thoughts, and your thoughts, if you're not Ukrainian, on the status of Anastasia are irrelevant. If it needs to be banned so desperately, Ukrainians will speak up about it. I'm sure many have, but the majority haven't, and that speaks volumes. This entry was created purely with the intention of keeping Ukraine and its people in your consciousness. How many of you would have clicked on this entry if I had simply said, "We need to help Ukraine"? I bet it wouldn't even have half the amount of views. This wasn't a trick entry. I do think it's healthy to have discussions like this, and films like Anastasia offer the perfect gateway for channels like mine to talk about the situation in Ukraine in a way that doesn't come across as uncaring with a throwaway entry that I won't even think about in a month's time. With this entry, I will forever remember Ukraine when I think of the film Anastasia, and I'm sure part of you will too. We cannot allow ourselves to forget Ukraine. It does suck to think about, yes, but imagine how much more it sucks for those forced to flee their homes because some power-hungry man decides he wants more land. We here at Under the Umbrellas fully support Ukraine. Donate to the channels I've provided if you can. Reach out to the Ukrainians directly and offer support if you can. War should not exist in the 21st century, and we need to do our bit to support refugees from any country at war. Remember that Ukraine is not the only country where its people are forced to leave their homes. Find ways to support the innocent civilians of countries like Syria, Afghanistan, Iraq, Libya, and of course, Ukraine. So this was our entry discussing whether or not Anastasia should actually be banned, but more importantly, an entry stressing the importance of helping Ukrainians. This was the second entry in our Discussing Disney series. Our next entry will be the long-awaited entry discussing whether or not Marvel's Moon Knight was good representation for systems. Thank you for checking out this entry. For now, I wish you Boreda, Brinhanda, Nozwaifta, or Nozda, wherever you are in the world. Bye!